From Chicago's CAN TV, this is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Chicago Newsroom here on CAN TV. I'm Ken Davis. What a magnificent early summer this has been already for making America great again. I mean, you know, if you're Mitch McConnell or Clarence Thomas, the company that prints MAGA hats, the owner of a pregnancy counseling center or a cake decorating company, or yes, our very own Bruce Rauner. If you, like our president, lie around late at night thinking we need to make our country more of a theocratic kleptocracy, well, my friend, this is your time. And on the Chicago front, is Rahn Emanuel going to be denied his run for a third term? Well, he will if Pat Quinn has his way. But first, our former governor's got to overcome a few serious legal and logistical challenges, not the least of which is trying to convince tens of thousands of Chicagoans to sign his petition in just the next 5 or 6 weeks. And then he's got to convince somebody that his petition's entitled him to put a binding referendum on the November ballot to limit Chicago's mayor to 2 terms. Beginning with the current guy, the guy who's in office. So is that a heavy lift, you ask? Well, we'll find out, because Pat Quinn is sitting right here.
Here I am, yeah.
Hi, welcome back.
I believe in climbing mountains.
Yes,
you made it sound like
yes,
Mount Everest there,
yes,
Ken.
You do. You do believe in climbing mountains. So, all right. Of all of the political challenges that faced you when you looked at this panoply of things that you needed to fix, what made you choose putting an 8-year term limit on the mayor of Chicago?
Well, I was born in Chicago. I live in Chicago. I lived in the same house for 35 years on the west side. And I think the events that occurred around Laquan McDonald's killing and the failure of the city to properly tell the public about what happened promptly. A friend of mine actually had to file the Freedom of Information Act request to get the video. It took over a year to get that information to the public. You know, that kind of underlined to me that we needed to take a look at the mayor's office in Chicago, because of all the big cities in America, the 10 largest cities, only Chicago does not have a term limit on its mayor. New York passed a referendum for it, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Houston, list goes on. And I think machine politics and not letting the Freedom of Information Act really be complied with underlines why a term limit on this mayor and all mayors henceforth is a good idea. 2 terms, that's 8 years. If you can't make a difference, then step aside and let someone else have a shot.
Yeah, but you know, right after they did that in New York, the people of New York were so upset with it that they just blew past it and re-elected their guy for a 3rd term.
Well, what happened was Bloomberg, who was the mayor, got the city council there to try and give him an extra term. They did that. The voters were outraged and went back and passed a 2nd referendum saying they could never do that again. 2 terms is all the mayor of New York is going to have, according to the voters. They set the rules. And in our state, the mayor could never do that. Once the voters vote in Chicago for a 2-term limit on the mayor, then the city council, the mayor have to abide by that unless they pass a referendum to change it. It's in the Illinois Constitution. It was passed in 1970 by the people of Illinois. And it says in each city, voters have the initiative right, the petition right, to put a binding, not advisory, binding referendum on their municipal ballot to put a term limit on the mayor. And 25 cities in Illinois have already done this. Springfield has, and Naperville, Oak Lawn, Des Plaines, many other cities. And so we want to do it in Chicago.
I had no idea that, I mean, until you said this the other day, I had no idea this even existed in the Constitution. I guess I'm not a 1970 Illinois Constitution scholar, but I mean, does it specifically say mayor? Is it specifically about mayors?
It says municipal officers, including mayor. It could be aldermen, too, or other officers. And basically the idea of the Constitutional Convention delegates was to allow people in municipalities to set the rules for their community. So it may be different from one town to another, but the idea is to give people this unfettered right, that it can't be interfered with by the city council or the mayor. The people have the right to set the rules for the mayor. the mayor doesn't rule them. And in Chicago, we've had machine politics, and frankly, this mayor, I think, needs a term limit, and putting it on the ballot in November, that's what we have to do. We have to get 100,000 names that we want to file on August 6th. So that's coming up a few weeks from now. We have over the minimum right now. We have, you need 52,519 signatures to qualify for the ballot, but we're in Chicago, so the more signatures, the better. We want to fight to protect our referendum. And,
a lot of money is going to be spent challenging those petitions.
Yeah, we'll spend a lot of money of Rahn Emanuel's money, but this is something people want to vote on. And there's something wrong, it seems to me, Ken. I was at City Council yesterday.
Yes, you were.
Yeah, the mayor, you know, he's standing there. He acts like this is a referendum that we shouldn't have, that he should be exempt from. Well, if he's so good, he should welcome the opportunity to convince the voters he's entitled to a third term.
Before you get too far ahead of this, I want to do this like one brick at a time. So the Constitution of the state of Illinois says that the people of a municipality have the right to petition to term limit their municipal officials. All cities have this.
Yeah, all municipalities, all counties have it too in
okay.
Illinois.
All right. So in Chicago, that would mean that it would have to appear on all city ballots, right? But this is not. November is not a municipal election. It's a state and federal election. But of course, obviously, they have to prepare ballots. So you want to get it on all the ballots in the city of Chicago.
In November.
In November.
Yeah, the law says you can put it on the ballot at any regular election. So November is a regular election before the municipal election
now, the
in February.
municipal election is February 22nd. Yeah. That's a couple of months behind that. So what you're saying is that if you could get this on this ballot in November, and if it passed by a majority enough that it would not be able to be challenged, I suppose, that you could immediately put into effect term limits in the city of Chicago, and that Rahn Emanuel would not be able to be on the ballot in just a couple months later in February.
He would be ineligible because he would have already served 2 terms, 2 4-year terms, same as the president. It's good enough for Barack Obama. It should be good enough for Rahn. 2 terms.
But isn't this dirty pool, though? I mean, come on. It's like the guy. No. Why not make it effective after the next? After his
Well,
his
you know
next
what?
term?
They did this in Broadview in 2016. They had a referendum on the November ballot, and the voters voted for term limits on their mayor. He'd been in for several terms, and he was ineligible to run in 2017.
So this has actually happened.
Yeah, this is actually where, matter of fact, that case went to the Illinois Supreme Court, which strongly defended the right of the voters to set the rules. See, sometimes I think folks get kind of accustomed to the view that the mayor tells us what to do. No, we, the people, set the rules, and that's what
you got that. You got
too
that
idealistic, huh?
No, the mayor tells us what to do. Come on.
But that's why I like initiative, petition, and referendum. I've been doing this for 42 years.
Yes, I know.
That's how we
I've
did
been to many of your
Citizen
press
Utility Board.
conferences
Right.
over the years.
And, you know, we've got to get back to that grassroots democracy. What democracy really looks like is what we're doing. These are our petitions. We say to people, you want to term limit the mayor? And if so, sign the petition. I was just at a senior gathering a moment ago before coming
Just
over
down
here.
the street here.
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
And, you know, people like what we're doing. You know, they kind of like the idea that the voters are in charge. The people are in charge.
At the uber level, do you believe that term limits are good for democracy?
Well, I think for any kind of executive official, whether it's president, governor, mayor, those are executive offices, and I think a 2-term limit is a healthy thing to have. As a matter of fact, President Obama, when he was leaving office, said he supported the notion that there be a 2-term limit, that there should be an opportunity.
But he doesn't now. But
Yeah, well, I feel that way too. Yeah. But you know, the original concept of this came from George Washington, because King George in England was on the throne for 59 years. We told him to take a hike, the American Revolution,
and he said, "What's wrong with this guy? He's only been in for 8 years and he's voluntarily leaving."
Exactly right. You know, he was amazed, King George, that George Washington of the United States of America voluntarily term limited himself and set that precedent. And The founding fathers really believed in what they called rotation of office. They didn't call it term limits. They didn't believe any one person should be in the same office for too long a period of time.
You got to go back to the farm and work your farm. And,
Yeah, well, the idea was to have a grassroots or citizen democracy. And obviously, we've gotten away from that, in Illinois especially. But the mayor of Chicago, the most important office, I filed a lawsuit to try and get an elected school board in our city. And, the court, the federal court and the state court both said the mayor is the one who does these appointments. If you don't like what's going on in the schools, get a new mayor. So this is part of it, too, term limit.
What about aldermen?
Well, I'm not opposed to that, but you got to take one office at a time, one question at a time. So, you start with the highest
That would require another
office.
52,000 signatures,
Yeah.
but that would cover all aldermanic.
Yeah.
You don't want to just term limit like one or two mayors,
No, you got
aldermen. Or
Yeah, no, you would have to do it across the board. But the longest journey begins with the first step. This is a step not only to put a reasonable term limit on the mayor. If it works in New York, Los Angeles, both of those communities, by the way, have clean election funding for candidates for mayor as well as aldermen. They've campaigned finance reform in their municipality, both in New York and Los Angeles. We don't have that in Chicago. We have a mayor who's going to raise another $25 million, and that really isn't a healthy thing for democracy.
Do we know, we don't have any real long-term experience with municipalities on this, right? I mean, are there any cities that have had it for decades?
Well, Springfield, Naperville, Oak Lawn, Des Plaines.
For a long time?
Yeah. And matter of fact, it's kind of accepted. All of these concepts of term limits have to be approved by referendum. The voters have to vote in favor of it. And so I think it's kind of healthy as we approach, the mayor just presumes he's entitled to a third term. Well, why? In New York, they had a debate. Is this a good thing or not to have the same person over and over again? And, if we succeed, and I hope we do, at getting our referendum on the November ballot, then between now and then, there'll be a robust debate in Chicago about whether this is a good thing for our city. And the mayor right now, he's in a gopher hole. He's terrified that this will go on the ballot. I was at the city council yesterday. He's got all his minions, running us down and running petition passing down. That's what I really don't like, because this is a fundamental right of the people of Illinois, guaranteed by our Constitution, and they're not taking it away from us. I've been down that road before, and we've won big court cases.
But they're not against ballot questions. I mean, for example, where do you stand on plastic straws? What do you think
Well,
about
I don't know.
plastic
Hear
straws?
the debate. They put that advisory question on the ballot yesterday.
Yeah.
Apparently, they think that's more important than a binding referendum on whether the mayor should have a third term or whether there should be term limits. I believe in referendum.
That there is a state law, is it, that requires no more than three.
They call it the rule of three.
Yeah, the rule of three for any municipality. And the mayor has been very good about making sure that those three questions get written up real early on, so that it's kind of blocked up.
Yeah. Well,
and now he's saying, well, this is nice. You can go get your silly little signatures, but we've already got our three questions.
Yeah, we'll see you in court. Okay, I've been there. In 1980, the Illinois Supreme Court dealt with the issue of initiative, the right of people to put binding questions on the ballot. And the court said this is a fundamental right that's subject to any kind of strict scrutiny on restrictions by the legislature, by a city council, to keep it away from the voters having that opportunity. So we won that case, and we're going to win this case. If the mayor tries to keep this off the ballot, then he's trying. Actually, one of our volunteers went up to him the Pride Parade a year or two ago and said, hey, how about signing the petition? Put it on the ballot. Let the people speak. If you think you're so good, you can win the referendum on your side.
Did he sign?
No, he declined.
He declined.
Yeah, he didn't. They're surrounded by bodyguards. Come on, we don't have an imperial mayor, or we shouldn't have an imperial president, and so it's important to use grassroots tools, a petition and referendum.
Well, I'm really glad we had a chance to talk, because honestly, even after reading all the press accounts of this, I was still confused about where this had to appear and under what circumstances. So I see that what you're saying then is that you have the right as a citizen to petition other citizens to ask them a binding question, and this is one of them. And so if they go to court and say, well, we're really sorry. We'd love to have this, but unfortunately we're full up. We've got our 3 questions, like the plastic straw question and all that. So we'll have to wait till another time. You will say to the court what? Well, they got to put it on anyway?
Well, first of all, we'll go to the Constitution that gives voters a clear, crystal clear right to do this. If you take away that right, it will allow the municipal officials, the incumbents, to always stymie the voters. So the purpose of this provision in our Illinois Constitution, it's not in the law or the ordinances, it's in the Constitution passed by the people, is to give people the right to set the rules for municipal officials who may not like term limits for themselves. You know, they'll try and resist. There's no question. Everything the mayor's doing now with his minions is to try and discourage people from signing our petition, circulating our petition. It ain't working. We're out there all over the place getting signatures.
So how does this work then with what number do you have to achieve? 50% plus 1 or?
Yeah, majority vote.
That's 50% plus 1?
Right, yeah. The people of Chicago will make a fundamental decision on November 6th when we vote for governor statewide. They'll be on the municipal ballot, just Chicago, should the mayor have a 2-term limit. If the voters vote yes, it means the incumbent, Rahn Emanuel, is ineligible to run.
So even if only 30,000 people get that far down to find that and they vote?
Au contraire. I think this will actually turn out many, many more voters than would normally even vote in a non-presidential year.
Do you actually think that Rahn Emanuel is that unpopular?
Well, you know what? It's not really devoted to Rahn Emanuel. He may think it is. He personalizes everything. It's devoted to a principle, a fundamental principle of American democracy. And especially now, the ultimate of campaign finance reform is term limits. Because if these incumbents can just raise millions and millions of dollars, $25 million in Chicago, that's what he had last time, you know, it makes it very hard to have true competition. And I don't think that's healthy for democracy.
But you've been doing this for a very long time. Why didn't you do this to Rich Daley?
Well, you know, I was elected to some other spots, including...
well, that's true. You were busy as an elected
lieutenant governor.
Yourself,
Before that, I was state treasurer.
Yeah.
But then when I became governor, it was probably the biggest crisis Illinois has had in our lifetime, because you had Blagojevich going to jail, you had a national economic collapse, the Great Recession, and our state budget was in a tailspin. So, you know, you got to kind of deal with things as they come. I've always believed in term limits. Matter of fact, I passed a petition back in 1994 to put term limits on Mike Madigan in the legislature. And that went to the Illinois Supreme Court. They held 4-3 against us, that it couldn't go on the ballot because the Constitution, a different part of the Constitution, does not allow term limits for legislators. It does allow for municipal officials like mayors. So the court's already held that.
So this is the thing that just, I think among my friends, what I hear a lot is, well, you know, why now? Why so urgent right at this moment? I mean,
what about the school system? We just learned that there was sex abuse in our Chicago public schools, rampant, widespread. And as I said earlier, I believe in elected school board. Chicago's the only district without one in the whole state. But when we went to court, both federal court and state court, the judges are saying it's all about the mayor. The mayor appoints everybody. He can appoint all the school board members. He can take them off anytime he wants. Well, he's accountable, says the judges. Well, that's why we should have term limits. This mayor doesn't believe in elected school board, and the school system has had one scandal after another in the past 8 years. This is not right. This is a very important part of our government.
One thing that I think that it's an argument I have not heard you make. You may have, but it occurs to me is that it might actually begin to put some juice into the aldermen if they know that the mayor is only there for 2 years or two terms, that maybe they're going to be there longer, and so they need to sort of start, I don't know, upping their game a little bit in a different way.
Well, you know, Dick Simpson, a good friend of mine and really a great reformer, a progressive reformer, a great teacher at the University of Illinois at Chicago.
And author.
Taught over half a century, all these students. He's for our campaign. He endorsed our petition. He signed our petition.
I know that, yeah.
And so, you know, having people like Dick Simpson, who has been a city alderman for 8 years, and he voluntarily term limited himself.
That's
he
something
believes
very
in
few
this.
people remember, that he actually did
Well,
that.
that'll come out in the referendum campaign.
Yeah.
You know, we know that the mayor is going to have all the king's horses and all the king's men and all of his money trying to tell people, one, don't sign the petition, don't circulate it, try and keep it off the ballot. It ain't going to work. We're going to get it on the ballot with hard work, with petition passing all over the city in the next few weeks. And so, you know, anybody listening wants to get a petition, our website, you can download it, is takechargechicago.org. That's the website, takechargechicago.org.
We'll put that down here at the bottom of the screen.
And, you know, it's really, and we have a phone number too. It's 773 area code and 999-2016.
999.
2016. But, you know, this whole thing is based on individual grassroots people, everyday people, not big shots, not aldermen, circulating the petition, getting 15 names on a sheet. And I think that's healthy. It's really good for grassroots democracy in Chicago.
So you, of course, didn't make it to your second term because some guy, Rauner, I believe it was.
Oh, yeah,
I think
2014.
He took you out of office.
Well, he had 70 million. We did not have anywhere close to that. And that's why, you know, I'm for term limits for governor, for mayor, and president.
I was just going to ask you, would you have voluntarily stepped down?
No, I said that
Two
elected terms.
If you had got that
sufficient.
second term, would you?
No, I
have?
announced that during the campaign.
Oh, did
yeah.
I missed that.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think that's enough time. If you're elected twice, that's enough for that office. You're going to try something else if you want. But, you know, part of what I saw then, and it's even gotten worse, frankly, is there's too much big money in politics. You know, and I don't think that's healthy for the kind of democracy of one person, one vote, as opposed to $1, one vote. And so that's what initiative does. That's what petition passing does. It allows people to make the law by signing their name, by circulating a petition. Then you put the question on the ballot, whether the big shots like it or not, you know, term limit the mayor. Yeah. And, you know, the people call the final decision.
I have to tell you that I've always been very cynical of this, just because, you know, when I hear discussion about elected school board, for example, I'm of the persuasion that it actually would just be a gigantic electromagnet for all of the special interest money in the world to come in and make sure that their people run the school board, the charter interests, whatever it is, the union, whatever side you don't like, you can say they would take it over. And I also think that, yes, we're all concerned about the gigantic amount of money that Rahn Emanuel has, that he can wipe out the opposition.
And where does he get the money?
Well,
where does all this money come from?
So if he was term limited and you had you're starting from scratch, then those special interests would get their candidates in there and they would just battle it out. Well, so you might have $200 million coming into the mayoral election.
90% of the people of Chicago voted yes in advisory referendums for an elected school board. Every other city, large and small in Illinois, has an elected school board. A lot of big cities across America.
It's a little different, though, when you're talking about a major metropolitan area like this.
Let's look at other big cities. Many of them have elected school boards. So, you know, that's an issue that, you know, who should make the final decisions? The mayor has screwed up over and over again in naming the school board members and basically ordering them to hire this or that person to be superintendent. I don't think that's healthy. I think that the voters should have a chance to elect a board that they choose. And, you know, when you really look at it, Ken, the power of petition and binding referendum, that's going on all over the Midwest.
Yeah.
In Missouri this year, they're voting on whether to raise the minimum wage for all the people of that state. They're voting on clean elections. And so we don't want Illinois and Chicago to be the exception in the Midwest. In Ohio and Michigan, they voted on redistricting reform to make sure that the districts are fair and equal and all that. And it's all done by initiative. The people tell the politicians that we're not happy with you calling the shots all the time. Now, keep in mind, referendums aren't going to take over from the city council or the legislature. They're safety valves. They're the opportunity when things aren't going the right way to send a big message. And term limits on the mayor is a really big message in Chicago.
Yeah. I guess maybe I want to get off of this because we have so many other things to talk about, but I think maybe one of the things that frightens me is what I saw 20, 30 years ago in California with the propositions in California, and I think that it kind of hobbled that state for a long time.
Well, I'll tell you, I know
but
Jerry Brown.
That's issues as opposed to offices.
The governor of California is Jerry Brown. I happen to know him when I was governor.
I'm sure you
I knew him for quite a while. I know his sister. She was state treasurer once upon a time. You know, when Jerry Brown became governor in California, they had a huge deficit. And he put an initiative on the ballot to raise taxes on the very well-to-do in order to close the budget deficit. Look at the guy we got, Rauner, resisting any kind of, he says the income tax should be the same for him, a billionaire, as it is for somebody making the minimum wage. Well, Jerry Brown had a different idea, put it on the ballot by petition, same thing we're doing here. Voters voted yes for that binding referendum. California closed and eliminated their budget deficit, more money for education and health care and all of that. And, you know, so you don't sell the voters short. The voters oftentimes are ahead of the incumbents when it comes to demanding real reform. And we can't let just the insiders run the whole show.
So let's talk about Janus v. AFSCME. This is a very interesting situation because this is something that was just simply a gubernatorial initiative. I mean, our governor, the guy who replaced you, just decided he was going to put a lot of energy into this, and by God, he pulled it off. And
well, he hates unions, especially public employee unions, the school teachers, the public employees. You know, when I was governor, I negotiated a contract with AFSCME as well as SEIU and other public employee union. And they got a contract that was ratified by AFSCME by 92% of their members. Rauner has not negotiated a contract, tried to attack at every step their right to organize and collectively bargain. And there was a case called Harris v. Quinn when I was governor that the Supreme Court ruled against SEIU, the union, and now yesterday, day before, they ruled against AFSCME and other public employee unions. You know, I think you need a governor who understands that those who work in the public sector, whether they're school teachers, public employees, have a right to have a union, to negotiate. In a lot of ways, it helps the organization of running the government. You have people who you negotiate with, you learn about issues. Instead, we have this war that Rauner is enacting on those who work for the public sector. It's not right.
There's just I think a kind of a general sense that he is part of a very large movement in this country that is, I mean, it's just antagonistic to unions of all kinds.
Public and private.
Public and private. Yeah. And I've had this conversation many times with people who lament the fact that we're now at full employment, so to speak, that there are more jobs available than there are people to fill them.
But unfortunately, wages aren't going up enough.
But there's this one little problem. It's like, there's lots of jobs, but they're $8 an hour jobs, so you have to have 3 of them in order to make a living or in order to pay the rent. So what's wrong with this picture? And my answer has always been, if you trace it back the last 30 years, it's the attack on collective bargaining that can be held accountable for this.
Yeah, the right to organize, the right to have a union is the key to a meal ticket to the middle class. You know, to keep wages moving up. With productivity increasing, the wages should go up. Same way with benefits, you know, health care benefits, retirement benefits to protect those, and also working conditions. You know, so having an organization that protects safety in the workplace, very important. And I believe in that. And, you know, we got to fight for that. And, you know, it's interesting, a lot of the labor organizations have rediscovered the power of petition and referendum, putting issues on their ballot. Even in Arizona, where Trump won in 2016, they passed a referendum to raise the minimum wage for all the workers in that state, a significant increase, and to have paid sick leave as well. The same voters voted for that. And so,
and you're seeing teachers in right-to-work states
just
coming, you know, full-throated, like, we don't care if we're a right-to-work state or not. We're striking. We are not going to take this anymore.
But they're also saying, in addition to workplace actions and reactions to the governors and such, they are going to the ballot box. They're channeling their energy, putting specific questions on the ballot to improve the salaries of teachers. And I just think this is, if we were here 100 years ago, and Jane Addams was with us. Jane Addams, who worked not far from where this studio is,
a few blocks away.
She said the key to taking on the ills of democracy is more democracy, more opportunity. She believed in initiative and petition and putting good, important questions on the ballot for the people to go around the insiders and the big interests and pass them into law. And she was the first American woman ever to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, right here from Illinois. But she was a fervent believer in initiative and democracy, Jane Addams.
Just broadening it a little bit, what happened a couple of nights ago in Queens was really instructive to me with Alejandra Ocasio-Cortez. I mean, just out of nowhere, 28-year-old Latina takes out the number 4 guy in the House, and it has spurred this incredible debate about Nancy Pelosi and our, frankly, generation. And whether it's just not time for people who are 60, 70, 80 years old to get out of the way and let people run it.
Well, I don't believe in ageism. I think people of all ages can make contributions. Everybody in, nobody left out. I work with a lot of young people today on our petition drive to have term limits on the mayor. I don't know if the viewers have heard about this, but it's a petition drive, and it's
You've
inspiring.
held it up several times.
Yeah. We want to put a binding referendum on the Chicago ballot in November to put a 2-term limit on the mayor, just like the president
For those
has.
of you just tuning in, here's a guy who knows how to use media.
Yeah.
By the way, our guest today is Pat Quinn, former governor of Illinois. If you've been listening on the podcast, the audio podcast, and saying, I know that voice, it's Pat Quinn. Yeah. You want to hold it up one more time?
Oh, yeah. This is what we're trying to do, term
okay,
limits on the mayor, and we're getting signatures. And this is a binding referendum. And 9 of the biggest cities in America, 9 out of 10 have a term limit on the mayor, except Chicago. So we want to give voters in Chicago a chance to vote for that. But, let's get to this issue. Young people coming up. I teach, classes and such, and, I visit with a lot of young people, and especially service members coming back from their service to our country, using their GI Bill of Rights. We want the country to be better than ever for them, for our kids. The great thing about America is parents sacrifice some of their present to help their kids and grandkids' future. That's why, I think it's important to have.
And then those kids pay into Social Security to pay back.
Amen. There you go. And so my philosophy is everybody in, nobody left out.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to look for tools of democracy, the way Jane Addams a century ago would have said, that empower young people, like that young woman in New York, 28 years old, gets elected. But New York has term limits on their mayor. They have public funding for candidates for mayor and city council there. We don't have that. Do you ever hear Rahn Emanuel talking about campaign finance reform in the city of Chicago?
He doesn't need to.
Would you ever see his lordship, the mayor, going out to a festival asking people, would you please sign a petition?
No,
that's we
no,
don't
Governor,
have.
I don't think we would see that.
We don't have an aristocracy here. We want to have a democracy, and it's especially important for young people coming up and all people.
What would you have done differently if you had gotten your second term? Where would we be today that would be different from where we are?
Well, I campaigned when I ran and won the election in 2010 on the need for revenue. It was not easy in the Tea Party years saying we needed to raise revenue through the income tax. But I won that election, and that's what we did. We got enough revenue to begin to really pay the bills and invest. Education, health care. We expanded healthcare and added 1 million people in Illinois when I was governor. That's pretty good. And we also invested in things like public safety and human services. So we were paying the bills, moving forward. Now the income tax, it had a sunset date. And I said when I was running in 2014, well, we should maintain the income tax to pay the bills and invest in things that count for all of us. Well, the other guy, Rauner, said, oh, no, it's not needed.
We're not going to need it, yeah.
Yeah, so he gets in and runs up a $17 billion deficit, unheard of in Illinois. Didn't have a budget for 2.5 years. I had 6 budgets every year. He had nothing for an extended period of time. Caused undue harm to human services, to students with their scholarship grants held in limbo. You know, it was very bad. And so ultimately, Republicans in the legislature say we can't put up with this guy, and they join with Democrats to get proper revenue to pay the bills. And I salute David Harris, who's a state representative, and Stephen Anderson, Republican members of the House, that put together a movement that got the revenue, withstood Rauner's veto, and is paying the bills. And the ultimate today is Rauner's going around saying he has a balanced budget based on the income tax that I proposed and that they...
that he said he wouldn't.
Yeah. You know, come on. He's a
But
very
wasn't there something bigger going on, though? I mean, those were the years, and they still are with us, when America was looking more into itself and becoming greedier and more self-centered. And it was very easy, I think, in those years to get people to say, we want less government, we want no taxes. In fact, if we could have no taxes at all, we would probably be a much better country.
Well,
that's still with us.
Yeah, when I got sworn in, it was 8 days after President Obama was sworn in, 9 days after. And it was a very tough economic time, as we said earlier, the Great Recession that George Bush handed us. And we had to dig out of the recession, and you know, the budget deficit was caused by the recession. We had an ethics recession in Illinois. We had to pass tough ethics laws, campaign finance reform, which we did. Having said that, in my time as governor, we abolished the death penalty. I signed that into law. We expanded health care, the Affordable Care Act. I signed that into law. And we also passed marriage equality. We did it through the legislature, and I signed that into law. And those are important reforms. And it was really good, it seemed to me, with President Obama's leadership at the national level. And we were trying to do big things in Illinois. I wish we could have done more. You know, I was very disappointed in the Speaker of the House. You know, I wanted to raise the minimum wage for all the workers of Illinois. And we put it on the ballot as an advisory question in 2014, passed 2-1. The Senate passed the increase in the minimum wage, but then the Speaker of the House wouldn't call the bill after the election. I lost the election, the candidacy, but he wouldn't call the bill. And you know, that really let a lot of workers down, hundreds of thousands of workers in Illinois. And I still don't know why he didn't do that. And it seemed to me that was the wrong thing to do.
Apparently you haven't returned your invitation to the governor's party on July the 16th. I said it was July 14th. They're having a grand reopening of the governor's mansion, and according to the governor's wife, she hasn't received your...
Well, I haven't gotten an invitation.
Oh, come on now.
No,
I know
really.
You got it.
Well, I don't know. They haven't sent it to my house.
Oh,
I'll
okay.
check the mail again.
Will you go if you get it?
I don't think so. I'm working. By the way, I'm working on a petition drive for
I know
term
you're going to
limits.
be busy with your petition drive. Yeah.
No, it's on July 14th. Our deadline to get the signatures is August 6th. So 40 days and 40 nights. That's what I'm doing. I go to movies in the park. I go to Millennium Park. I go to festivals.
The police hearings. I saw you there the other night. One of those. Yeah.
You know, Saturday there's the big rally at Daly Center. I encourage everyone to come to deal with the fight for reuniting these children that were separated by Trump and his minions down there at the border. And we can have a big rally, and I'll be there. So, you know, I'm not that interested in, you know, that particular subject. I lived in the mansion for 6 years. It was a great house. Abraham Lincoln visited that house. It needed repair, but you know, let's keep in mind, we're in a recession, a grievous recession with 11% unemployment. I wasn't going to say the money that we get in Illinois needs to fix up the governor's house. Instead, I got $140 million to invest in housing in Illinois for people who are being evicted and who are being foreclosed upon.
I'm going to give you the opportunity to say something nice about Bruce Rauner. Can you at least acknowledge that he did that with his own money, that was for the people of Illinois? He fixed up that beautiful
Well, it's
house.
privately funded, yeah. And he and his wife did that. I'm happy they did that with private money. But I'm not a billionaire.
Thank you to them for doing it?
Yeah, well, I'm glad they did, but I don't think you should get carried away with this. The bottom line is we couldn't spend public money doing that in a recession. And it is a special place.
Yeah.
Nobody invited more people to the governor's mansion than me when I was governor. I invited a lot of service members and Gold Star families.
You kind of enjoyed being there, didn't you?
It's a people's house, sure. And we had, we had all kinds of gatherings. Matter of fact, the day that the marriage equality bill passed, we had a celebration at the governor's mansion, and Representative Sam Yingling, who voted yes for marriage equality, proposed to his partner.
Oh, is that right?
And I told him to do it underneath the picture of Abraham Lincoln at the governor's mansion. And so he took out the ring, and there you go.
Okay, now, you've mentioned Governor Rauner, and you've mentioned a number of things that have to do with the speaker. In 1970, the state of Illinois passed its new constitution after the Constitutional Convention. Barely 10 years later, you decided that the way the House of Representatives was run, with 3 representatives in each district, was too expensive. Sound a little bit like a kind of a modern day Republican thing. It's like, this is too much money, we don't need to spend this kind of money, let's cut this back.
Supported by the League of Women Voters, among others, our proposal.
I understand, but the cutback amendment caused the House of Representatives to be reduced from 177 to 118 representatives.
It fired 59 representatives.
Fired 59 representatives.
It actually led to a more representative House, though, because there was a greater percentage of African Americans, Hispanic Americans for the first time were elected to the new House based on
But there are
district.
plenty of people with 20 years or so, or 20 or 30 years of perspective now, who are saying that actually you birthed Mike Madigan, that you're responsible for this, because virtually a year after it passed in 1983, Mike Madigan ascended to the throne and hasn't, except for those little 2 years, hasn't left it since. And that representation in the House is actually less than it was, and it can. Several people have written in the last few months about, if you look back on it, this is Quinn's fault. The reason that we have this problem is because of you.
Well, it passed 2-1 in 1980. It would pass 3-1 today. The voters were not happy with the previous system, and I believe in term limits for legislators, and I actually tried to get that on the ballot. And the Supreme Court, by a 4-3 margin, said we couldn't do it. And that was in 1994. It was opposed by Mike Madigan. He called me up and said, "Why are you doing this?" And I said, "Well, I believe in term limits for legislators, for governors, and for mayors." And that's what I'm doing now, the term limit on the mayor. With respect to the cutback amendment, for years and years before it was passed, there was a system in place that made it very difficult for racial minorities, black folks as well as Hispanic folks and Asian folks, to get elected. And under our new system that we enacted through the initiative process and the voters voted for overwhelmingly, we have an Asian American elected for the first time ever in the history of Illinois, many Latino representatives, same way with black representatives. So I think it stood the test of time. And if those who don't like the current system, they can do what we did, go out and get signatures and put a different system on the ballot.
But what about bullet ballots? I mean, that was the whole idea of the if you're in a, let's not say racial minority, but let's just say political minority. Let's say you're in a Republican district. You and all your friends who are Democrats can all get together and vote 3 times for that one person, right?
It was a very confusing system. There were more spoiled ballots than in the state representative races. That's one of the reasons the League of Women Voters were strongly for what we did. Clearly it upset and disrupted the status quo. And anytime you have a referendum, whether it's cutting the size of the legislature or having term limits on the mayor of Chicago, it disrupts things, and they don't like that. But I think the voters have to assert themselves from time to time and say, here are the rules. You may not like what we're doing, but that's too bad for you. The people are the government, not the insiders, not the incumbents.
So you have no regrets then about
Absolutely
about
not.
the cutback?
No. Matter of fact, I'd like to see more initiatives in Illinois. With respect to redistricting, I made a proposal that was simple, clean, and pristine on having an independent commission draw the districts for the next reapportionment. And that could be put on the ballot, and it would meet the test of constitutionality, and that may happen in 2020. We'll see.
I'm lost now. There was a redistricting during your time, wasn't there?
Yeah.
2010.
Right. And I signed it, both for Congress and for the legislative districts. It has not been challenged by any court, state or federal. And matter of fact, the law professor who did all the good legal work up in Wisconsin, showing that they had gerrymandered districts for the state representatives up there, he looked at our system and said that we meet his efficiency fair test in our districting in Illinois. So
I'm out of my league here, so I can't really lead this conversation properly. But I hear all the time that Illinois is just another one of these ridiculously gerrymandered states that is just, except it's gerrymandered for the Democrats, and Republicans are constantly squawking about the fact that
they can squawk all they want, and nobody's gone to court and shown by evidence that there's any unfairness. I clearly, carefully looked at those districts, and I signed it into law because it did meet the test of the Constitution, and there's no unfairness, according to many, many studies that have made of this. And so, sometimes people are sore losers. They don't win the election. Well, that's because sometimes they don't put up a candidate, for goodness sake. But I think what we have to have in Illinois, Ken, and this is where I come from, having been governor, is we need more citizen involvement through petition and referendum. We are the exception in the Midwest. Ohio, Michigan, almost the same size as our state, have robust initiative opportunities to vote on redistricting reform, to vote on raising the minimum wage or clean elections and campaign finance reform. We have this monopoly of power in the hands of the mayor of Chicago and legislators and the governor down in Springfield. I don't think that's healthy. I think you always need to have that safety valve where voters can petition questions onto the ballot. For example, expanding health care. We could do that in Illinois by referendum if we had that power in our Constitution.
All right, we've got a few minutes left, and I want to jump around a little bit. You're obviously aware of all of these stories that have been happening about the Quincy Veterans Home, 13 people dying from
I've been there.
Well, I'm sure you have. I was going to say, being as involved as you are and have always been with the veterans community, I'm sure you've been there many times.
Yeah, I have.
So, when you were governor, were you aware of it being deficient? Did you think that it was a rundown place? Was it a kind of a rat hole?
It needed constant investment because it was built in the late 19th century, and I made those investments. I think, and also the health care, you had to have nursing care and so on, and we did that. But I also understood that you cannot just have one huge veterans long-term care facility hundreds of miles from where veterans live. So I went and got the federal government to agree, and we got state money involved, to build a new veterans home in Chicago. And we had a groundbreaking when I was governor right at the end. And Rauner dropped the ball, didn't do anything. Once I left office, it's on the northwest side of Chicago. That should have been built and operated.
Oh, the one on Oak Park Avenue, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's still sitting there. It's just a shell.
It had federal money.
Yeah.
It had Alzheimer facilities. You've got to put these homes near where the family and the veterans live. And he really dropped the ball there. With respect to the issues that came up after I left regarding the whole problem of Legionnaire's disease, he deserves total, not credit, but criticism for what they did. They failed to inform the families promptly, and they're going to have to answer a lot of questions that come up in this campaign.
I guess the question that has been burning for me is, had anyone ever raised with you, because I mean it's not a short period of time. Rauner's only been in office for 4 years, and these plumbing issues look like they've been around for a long time. Did anybody ever come to you and say, you know, Governor, we got like a real disaster in the making here? No.
No, I had a person who was a veteran who served in Iraq, a woman who was a decorated veteran who was in charge of the Department of Veterans Affairs. She helped get the new veterans home started in the northwest side of Chicago, and she was in charge of making sure that all veterans homes were top-notch. We never had those kind of problems. They occurred in 2015 after I left the office. Now, anytime you have a crisis of any kind, the governor's got to promptly take charge. He did not, and Rauner I'm talking about, and especially inform the families. You know, one of the families called and was trying to reach the mom, and she had passed from Legionnaire's disease. So there was just a total breakdown, and frankly, it was fatal mismanagement by the Rauner administration, and they have to be accountable for that. They're trying to avoid that.
Blagojevich, the Blagojevich pardon, what do you think about that?
Well, I'm not for any pardon or clemency. I did 5,000 clemencies when I was governor, cases, more than any governor. And my rule...
More than Blagojevich, anyway.
Yeah, he didn't do any hardly at all. He did a few, but not many.
Right.
But I always wanted to know if there was remorse, if the person was apologetic, sorry, and that they had done something to repair the damage. People were oftentimes very candid. They made a mistake, and they said they made a mistake, and they asked for forgiveness and had remorse. You know, Rod Blagojevich has been convicted in court of crimes. It went to the highest court in our land. They said, yes, you are guilty. There's no more appeals. So when that happens, you've got to express remorse and say, I'm sorry to the people of Illinois. His failure to do that and sort of doing, you know, saying the justice system is wrong or something like that, you don't get mercy for that, no clemency.
So he should just stay right where he is?
Well, you know, until you decide you're going to say you're sorry to the people and admit you're wrong, as thousands of others did who have gotten pardons from me, you know, then I think, you know, you have to bear that weight.
Why do you think that our beloved president is so interested in the Blagojevich case?
Well, it's kind of bizarre. I guess he was on his TV show. It appears that they're trying to attack the Justice Department and the whole system of justice in our country. I'm not in any way supportive of that. I think men and women of law enforcement and Justice Department, they do a good job.
Like I said, short time. Let me jump ahead here. J.B. Pritzker. Have you endorsed J.B. Pritzker?
Oh, yes. I'm for J.B., and I know him well. I've known him a long time. He's going to be the greatest advocate of early childhood education Illinois has ever seen, and that is the very best investment government can ever make. If I had been reelected in 2014, we in our budget laid out a budget for investing in early childhood education. We would have had the resources to do so, and I think JB will have that if he can defeat
Do you have a
Rauner.
relationship with him at all? I mean, do you guys
we're
talk?
friendly, very friendly, yeah.
So he might call upon you for some advice
He's
once
called
in a
me
while?
a few times, yeah. When there was a primary, I talked to all the candidates. I had breakfast or lunch or whatever with everybody. I told them my point of view, you know, and I think that's healthy to have that. I was a different party than Jim Edgar. I was state treasurer when he was governor, and when I was governor, he was a private citizen. But he came by the mansion, and we enjoyed a positive relationship. I think he, like I, has been distressed by the way Rauner's mishandled the budget of Illinois.
The FBI tapes that Rauner is having a good time playing on his commercials, do you think they're going to hurt him? I mean, it really makes him look like he's kind of an amateur political operative or something.
Well, I don't know. I think it's up to the voters. I think the issue is Rauner has failed miserably as governor. There's a contest. J.B. Pritzker has done many good things in his private life. I worked with him on 1871. The state of Illinois invested in this kind of incubator at the Merchandise Mart that's created hundreds of businesses and thousands of jobs. And so that's a pretty good record, a heck of a lot better than Bruce Rauner's over and over again running Illinois down. J.B. Pritzker is going to be a champion of working people.
Can he win? Now, don't give me a political answer. Give me an honest answer. Can he win?
Well, I think every election is a test. I think the wins are favorable to winning, but you got to do it on the ground. So there's a saying in politics, you're either the piñata or the stick. And I'd rather see JB, be the stick and tell everybody that Bruce Rauner has not done a good job for Illinois, lay out facts, and let the people decide. And especially, Pritzker has a very good positive program for health care, expanding health care, expanding early childhood education, and I think he'll be a jobs governor.
It's often been said that Illinois is basically Alabama with a great big city attached to it up on top. I have a sense that Bruce Rauner is much more popular in Illinois than those of us in Chicago give him credit for being.
No, I don't agree with that. Just the other day, he was running down Champaign-Urbana.
Well, he did do that.
I've made a lot of investments in the university there, and it's a very good place for brain power.
Yeah.
And to run down that region and say that people aren't up to the task, not enough job.
We got to build something in Chicago workers, so that they can come and live in it.
Yeah, come on. Yeah. Everybody in, nobody left out. It's very important to understand that Illinois does have. I used to live in downstate Illinois. We have many different cities and communities there. We're all linked together in a mighty state. We're the greatest agricultural state in the Union. Number 1 in growing soybeans, number 2 in growing corn. And agriculture and agribusiness is a key part of our economy.
I didn't know that. We're number 2 in corn?
Yeah, I was first, we're second. I went to a gathering.
I didn't know that.
But I went to a gathering in Iowa.
We were like 7th or something.
They had the temerity to say that they were number 1 in soybeans. So I went back to Illinois. We checked out the record. We're way ahead of them in soybean production.
Well, good for us, Governor.
That's a miracle crop.
All right.
And that's what Trump is hurting us. With his tariffs. Yeah. It'll hurt Illinois farmers a lot.
Your friend Rahn Emanuel wants to give Jeff Bezos and Amazon about $2.5 billion if they agree to land here. Good idea, bad idea?
Well, you want to know exactly what you're getting into. You don't want to shift tax burdens away from big companies onto the backs of working men and women and
because
small business.
Because that $2.5 billion is not like a drawer full of cash. It's basically incentives that are like long-term tax
It's basically tax shifting.
Tax shifting.
I think you can have incentive packages that are targeted and very carefully targeted, but the public's got to know what they are ahead of time, and it can't be behind closed doors. So we shall see.
I was instructed by Dave Resnick, our producer, to ask you, are you running for any other offices?
No, I've had a pretty good run at that. I've enjoyed running for office and being in office, but I may have said this a time or two. I believe in initiative. This is people signing pieces of paper.
Oh, are you doing something? Are you doing like a petition drive of some
yes,
kind?
I am.
Oh, you
it's
are?
It's called Term Limits on the Mayor.
Oh, yes. I think I've seen that
and
somewhere
our website
before.
is takechargechicago.org.
Yeah.
And the phone number is 773-999-2016. And, my whole political career, 42 years of passing petitions, has been based on not celebrities, but everyday people signing a piece of paper. I get their autographs, not the big shots. And enough autographs that we get 100,000 signatures. We put a term limit on the mayor, on the ballot, binding referendum in Chicago in November. And then if the voters vote yes, it means the incumbent has got to step aside. The people have spoken.
And the clock has spoken. We got to get out of here.
All right.
All right. Well, it's always fun having you on the show. I really enjoy it. I hope you come back again sometime. I like listening to you over on Ben Jarofsky over on CPT.
WCPT,
always
2 to 5 o'clock.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Okay, well, we're going to have to wrap this up now. Thanks to Pat Quinn, former governor of Illinois and forever passer of petitions.
Amen.
Yes, indeed.
I'll be rocking the boat. In a nursing home
as long
someday.
as, yeah, right. He'll be rocking that wheelchair. All right, enough. We got to go. Thank you very much for watching Chicago Newsroom today. I'm Ken Davis, and don't forget you can watch this and all of our shows by going to this particular address where you'll see the archive of our shows and lots of other things too. So I hope you'll join us with that. And next week we'll continue, next week we're going to have a rebroadcast, and then after that we're going to go back to talk to a mayoral candidate, and we are hoping that we might have Gary McCarthy here. But of course, it's all scheduling, so we'll see how it goes. Talk to you later. Thanks for watching. Happy 4th of July. Bye.